The topic of this talk in the series Christian Existentialism is extremely important to me. Part of that is heritage. My father was Cherokee on both sides, and honoring that heritage, I have long been a student of Indigenous peoples, and in particular, of Indigenous religions. This will be the longest video in this series, but I make no apologies for that. Let those who have the ears to hear, hear, and those who want to subsist on sound bites go find that junk food for the mind elsewhere. Okay. Before we launch into this subject, I want to share a couple of passages to keep in mind. The first comes from the canonical Gospel of John, one among the few cherry-picked early Christian texts that the Church decided to call the New Testament. But the Church accidentally left something really important in this text that they probably didn't want to include. Something that belied what the Church was up to. Okay. In the Gospel of John, a group of Jewish religious leaders, perhaps ones connected with the temple, approached Yeshua of Nazareth, Jesus, wanting him stoned to death for blasphemy, for claiming that he was the Son of God. And in John 10:34, Jesus answers them, saying, "Is it not written in your law, I said, ye are gods?" Let me repeat that. Is it not written in your law, I said, ye are gods? Who is the I in this statement? Well, it's God, the Almighty. And who are the ye? Well, everyone. You, I, everyone. Is it not written in your law, I said, ye are gods? And what is the law being referred to here? Well, Yeshua is quoting Psalm 82. In Psalm 82:6, King David quotes God himself as saying, I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. Now, isn't that interesting? Here, Jesus is not making a special claim for himself. He is making a claim for all of us, and he is citing King David and the Lord himself as authorities for this claim. Wow. Wow! As I explained in the first talk in this series, many of the non-canonical Gospels, Acts, Epistles, Apocalypses, and so on, the ones that the official church decided not to include in the New Testament, make the same claim, that each of us is a chip off the old block, that we are all divine. It isn't just Yeshua of Nazareth who is a son of God. All of us are sons and daughters of God. There's a wonderful book by Gilbert Murray called 5 Stages of Greek Religion. And if you go back to the very first of these stages, to pre-heroic age Greece, you find that at that time, the word theos, or God, had a predicative force. So, where Christians will posit a God and then list his attributes, God is love, God is all-powerful, God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, etc. The pre-heroic age Greeks would go out and look at the natural world and the forces and entities in it, and they would say, this is a God. This force or entity in the world is a God. Or to put it another way, one of the manifestations of the God, the One. The wind is a God, the mountain is a God, the spring, the tree, friendship, love, these are all gods. So, Christians, in their retellings of Greek myths, typically, well, they get it all wrong. You know, they say, oh, there's a God whose province is the wind, or there's a God whose province is the sea, and this God rules over his or her province, rather than the sea is a God, the wind is a God. This is a big deal. Because, of course, the Christians had this very personalized father figure in the sky god that they had inherited from the Jews who invented monotheism. By the way, the ancient Hebrews were not originally monotheistic. The idea evolved among them and ended up being one of their major contributions to human civilization and thought. There was another flirtation with monotheism in Egypt with King Akhenaten, but we won't go into this. For now, consider this. Think how divergent that Christian version of Greek myth is from how the early Greeks actually thought. It's very, very different. Christian missionaries and amateur anthropologists went throughout the world during the time when Western Europe had colonized the world and collected stories from indigenous peoples, their mythologies, they called them, instead of calling them their religious teachings. And they got these teachings via stories all wrong. They put them through their lens. They saw things through their lens. And so, instead of recognizing that they were dealing with peoples who thought of these forces and entities in the world as gods, as chips off the one, they said, oh, these people believe that there's a god of corn, and there's a god of the sky, and there's a god of spiders, and love, and friendship, and war, and whatever. Rather than that to indigenous peoples, these are all gods in the sense that they are manifestations of the one, of what indigenous peoples of the Americas call the Great Spirit or the Great Mystery. The early Greeks believed this, and wherever one goes worldwide, if one looks back at the earliest religious expressions of peoples, one finds the same thing. The idea that the world is shot through with God and its contents are manifestations, chips off the old block. Consider, for example, Japanese Shinto. This ancient religion doesn't have priests. Each person is responsible for his or her own religious practice. It has tens of thousands of gods that are called kami, and the kami are forces and entities in the natural world that are sacred, that are considered spiritual entities. That's the point. This thing in the natural world, this phenomenon, this entity is sacred. The sky is sacred, the moon is sacred, the tree, love, friendship, these things are sacred. They are part of the divine. They are gods. It's very different from saying, oh, there's this God, a sort of superhuman person, and the God rules over the area of human life, some area, wisdom, say. You know, there's this god Athena whose provinces, whose domains of influences are wisdom and justice and war. The earliest Greeks would say, no, wisdom and justice and war are gods, and we refer to these as Athena. And that's very, very different from what Greek religion metamorphized into. Or consider Hinduism, which is not a single religion, but a family of related but differing religious traditions. A very great Hindu myth goes like this. Brahma goes to sleep on a lily pad, and he dreams a dream, a great dream. And that dream is this universe, including all the other gods and you and me and droplets of rain and the small pink ears of mice and the laughter of children and all the denizens of earth, sky, and sea, all are entities in his dream. They are manifestations of his dreaming consciousness. Think on that for a moment, will you? This very ancient idea, we're going to find, turns out to be true. That behind everything is consciousness, the consciousness of the one. And what was true of the ancient Greeks and Japanese and the early Hindus, one finds to be true in indigenous religion of peoples worldwide. though one has to go back pretty far to recover the original belief system in some cases. They did not, and often do not today, divide the world up into a material world and a separate spiritual realm, as Christians today typically do. How did that come about? Well, the Christian church grew up in the atmosphere of Platonism, and that was Plato's idea, the idea of two separate realms, a spiritual one and a material one. And the official Christian church that emerged after Constantine made Christianity a state-sanctioned religion of the Roman Empire borrowed Plato's idea wholesale. This idea, this bifurcation, this splitting of the universe and of ourselves down the middle, well, there's a corrective for that. And that corrective is learning about the religious ideas and practices of early and contemporary indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples, and new lovers, by the way, have always known that if you get into a state of vision, into a visionary state, you will see the divine in everything. Here's how prophet and poet William Blake put it in his memorable fancy. The prophets Isaiah and Ezekiel dined with me, and I asked them how they dared so roundly to assert that God spake to them, and whether they did not think at the time that they would be misunderstood, and so be the cause of imposition. Isaiah answered, I saw no God, nor heard any, in a finite, organical perception, but my senses discovered the infinite in everything. And here's Blake in A Vision of the Last Judgment. When the sun rises, do you not see a round disk of fire, something like a guinea, that is a small coin? Oh, no, no, I see an innumerable company of the heavenly host crying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The spiritual world is the material world seen from the point of view of a visionary state. And once you have experienced visionary states, you can just step back into them anytime you want to. They are always there. In a previous video in this series, I told an old joke about how many Vietnam veterans it takes to change a light bulb, and the answer was, you wouldn't know because you weren't there, man. Well, the same is true of vision. You have to go there, man. You have to take the trip, and once you do, nothing will ever be the same to you. The current materialistic reductionist worldview that goes by the name in the West of science, but is actually scientism, will seem to you silly, naive, the sort of thing that's believed by somebody who hasn't been there, man. Okay, I want to share with you now some of the work of the Santee Dakota physician and healer Ohiyesa, a.k.a. Charles Eastman. He was fortunate enough to have been born among a people, the Dakota Sioux, who had not been cut off from the visionary world. He went there, man, and so he will be as good a guide as any to what has been lost. Let's see what he has to say. Ohiyesa wrote in 1913 a book called The Soul of the Indian. It was his explanation for white men of the religion of the indigenous peoples of what white America called North America, but is widely known among Indian people today as Turtle Island, after an Iroquois formulation. The language of my father's people, by the way, the Cherokee, is an Iroquoian language. Here's something really interesting and important about Ohiyesa. He was raised among the Dakota Sioux, the Santee Dakota. Dakota and Lakota are alternate terms in different dialects of this one language. The D becomes an L, or the L becomes a D. Okay, but then Oyeyesa went off and studied in the white man's world and became a physician and came back to his people. He practiced there as a physician and he treated the wounded after the Battle of Wounded Knee. We have in Oyeyesa's amazing book, The Soul of the Indian, one of those rare instances in which a people otherwise voiceless has a voice. Most Amerindian tribes, there were over 600 in North America alone, did not have written languages. The Cherokee didn't have one until quite late. And so this book, The Soul of the Indian, is one of those rare instances in which we learn about Indigenous American Indian life and thought in detail, not from some Christian missionary who was misunderstanding it, but from someone who lived it. That is, not in a work filtered through the understandings and misunderstandings of white missionaries and anthropologists. And I've read a lot of books, but I think this might be my favorite. My favorite book. Yes. Oyeyesa. His white culture name was Charles Eastman, and he wrote The Soul of the Indian, published in 1903, and in that book he writes, "The worship of the great mystery was silent, solitary, free from all self-seeking. It was silent because all speech is of necessity feeble and imperfect. Therefore, the souls of my ancestors ascended to God in wordless adoration. It was solitary because they believed that He is nearer to us in solitude, and there were no priests authorized to come between a man and his Maker. None might exhort or confess or in any way meddle with the religious experience of another. Among us, all men were created sons of God and stood erect as conscious of their divinity." Wow. Wow. Remember what Yeshua said? Ye are gods. Here's Eastman again. Oyeyesa. "There were no temples or shrines among us save those of nature. Being a natural man, the Indian was intensely poetical. He would deem it sacrilege to build a house for him who maybe met face to face in the mysterious shadowy aisles of the primeval forest, or on the sunlit bosom of virgin prairies, upon dizzy spires and pinnacles of naked rock, and yonder in the jeweled vault of the sky. The elements and majestic forces in nature, lightning, wind, water, fire, and frost, were regarded with awe as spiritual powers, but always secondary and intermediate in character. We believed that the Spirit pervades all creation and that every creature possesses a soul in some degree, though not necessarily a soul conscious of itself. The tree, the water, the grizzly bear, each is an embodied force, and as such, an object of reverence. The natural man saw miracles on every hand, the miracle of life in seed and egg, the miracle of death in lightning flash and in the swelling deep. Nothing of the marvelous could astonish him, as that a beast might talk or the sun stand still. The virgin birth would appear scarcely more miraculous than is the birth of every child that comes into the world, or the miracle of the loaves and fishes excite more wonder than does the harvest that springs from a single ear of corn." Wow. Wow. How far we have fallen from that sort of view of the world. Our great mother might well say to us with King Lear, "How sharper than a serpent's tooth to have a thankless child." We are awash in miracles, like a reef with plankton. But we're so inured to them that we don't see them for what they are. I recently saw a wonderful meme that said, "Can you call me back later? I'm watching a live stream." And the person was out in a forest watching a stream. We should be reeling from the real of the real. But we are so degenerate, so cut off from vision of the spiritual world here and now around us, that we seek cheap thrills in cities with streets of gold in some far-off heaven, or tickets back to the source with the Heaven's Gate cultists on the Hale-Bopp comet. We'll come back to those crazies later. There's a problem with our upbringing. And in his great book, Old shows us a different way. Here he is on the training of a Dakota youth. The Indian was a religious man from his mother's womb. From the moment of her recognition of the fact of conception to the end of the second year of life, which was the ordinary duration of lactation, it was supposed by us that the mother's spiritual influence counted for most. Her attitude and secret meditations must be such as to instill into the receptive soul of the unborn child the love of the great mystery and a sense of brotherhood with all creation. Silence and isolation are the rule of life for the expectant mother. She wanders prayerful in the stillness of the great woods or on the bosom of the untrodden prairie, and to her poetic mind, the imminent birth of her child prefigures the advent of a master man, a hero, or the mother of heroes, a thought conceived in the virgin breast of primeval nature and dreamed out in a hush that is only broken by the sighing of the pine tree or the thrilling orchestra of a distant waterfall. Presently she returns to camp carrying the mysterious, the holy, the dearest bundle. She feels the endearing warmth of it and hears its soft breathing. It is still a part of herself, since both are nourished by the same mouthful, and no look of a lover could be sweeter than its deep, trusting gaze. She continues her spiritual teaching, at first silently, a mere pointing of the index finger to nature, then in whispered songs, bird-like, at morning and evening. To her and to the child, the birds are real people who live very close to the great mystery. The murmuring trees breathe his presence, the waterfalls, the falling waters chant his praise. This wild mother has not only the experience of her mother and grandmother and the accepted rules of her people for a guide, but she humbly seeks to learn a lesson from ants and bees, spiders, beavers, and badgers. She studies the family life of the birds, so exquisite in its emotional intensity and its patient devotion, until she seems to feel the universal mother heart beating in her own breast. In due time, the child takes of his own accord the attitude of prayer and speaks reverently of the powers. He thinks that he is a blood brother to all living creatures, and the storm wind is to him the messenger of the great mystery. Okay. Wow. Go read the book, 1903, Charles Eastman or Old-Yesa, The Soul of an Indian. In the 1930s, the poet John Neihardt, a German poet, went to the Pine Ridge Reservation to meet and converse with the great Oglala Lakota holy man, Black Elk. Among the many wondrous things shared with Neihardt by Black Elk was this. In the old days, all our power came to us from the sacred hoop of the nation. And so long as that hoop was unbroken, the people flourished. Black Elk explains why Lakota teepees are round and are arranged in a great circle. Birds make their nests in circles, he says, for theirs is the same religion as ours. Let me repeat that. Commit it to memory. Commit it to your soul. Birds make their nests in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. Let me emphasize that Black Elk was not being metaphorical here. He was being quite literal. What is this? The religion of both the birds and the Lakota. Well, let me tell you a story. Don't you love stories? Back in 1836, the famous Unitarian minister and writer Ralph Waldo Emerson hitched up his buggy in Concord, Massachusetts, and drove the 15 miles from there to Cambridge, where he delivered an address to the graduating class of the Harvard Divinity School. And what he told them, which is what I have already told you, created a firestorm. Boston papers denounced him as a heretic. People wanted to hang him. He told them that Jesus wasn't making a special claim for himself, but a claim for all of us, that we are all divine. In the Coptic Gospel of Thomas, by the way, Jesus says, if they ask you where you're from, say to them, I am from the light. And that the kingdom is not below or above, but within each of us and all around us. In the Coptic Gospel of Thomas, which I quoted in the first video of this series, there's this passage. His disciples came to him and asked, when will the new world come? And he said to them, it has already come and you do not recognize it. And the Lakota and my people, the Cherokee, knew this. And so did the ancient Greeks. So did the ancient Japanese with their kami, and the ancient Hindus, and ancient peoples generally. They knew that all of creation is shot through with God, including you. And the Sioux peoples were not alone in this. One finds worship of the one, of the great mystery or great spirit, everywhere among indigenous peoples. If we look at the Omaha Indians of North America, they say that at the beginning all things were in the mind of Wakanda. The Lakota call this great spirit, the one, the grandfather, or Wakantanka. From the Maori we get this. Eo dwelt within the breathing space of immensity. The universe was in darkness and water everywhere, and he began by saying, darkness become a light. Or from the Kagawa people of South America, the mother of our songs, the mother of all our seed, bore us in the beginning of things. Or the Yaruro of South America, everything sprang from Kuma. Or from the people of Tahiti in Polynesia, he existed. Ta'aura was his name. In the immensity of space, there was no earth, there was no sky. There was no sea, there was no man. Ta'aura calls existing alone. Wait for it. He became the universe. And again, what we find in these religions is some version of pantheism or panentheism. Pantheism, by the way, is the belief that God exists in all things, that all things collectively are the one. Panentheism is the belief that God pervades all things but extends beyond them as well. And one finds a version of one of these in almost all indigenous religion and in the earliest stages of most of the major religions. Even Taoism, which is widely but incorrectly considered to be non-theistic, offers up this in its central text, the Tao Te Ching. There was something undefined and complete, coming into existence before heaven and earth. How still it was and formless, standing alone and undergoing no change, reaching everywhere and in no danger of being exhausted. It may be regarded as the mother of all things. I do not know its name, but I give it the designation, the Tao. Sounds a lot like panentheism, doesn't it? Why? Because it is. So, Be careful when you read these collections of myths and the like, because they're filtered through this weird Christian view that splits the universe down the middle into separate spiritual and material realms. When the conquistador Hernando de Soto visited the Cherokee village of Tanasi, which had 14,000 people living there, he thought they had no religion because he didn't see priests or temples. But of course, to the Cherokee, every person is a priest, and the world itself is a temple. And so the Christian retellings of ancient and indigenous religious stories often don't reflect what early and indigenous peoples actually believed, that these forces and entities that make up the natural world are manifestations of the One, of the Great Spirit, of the Great Mystery, that those forces and entities in the world are themselves divine and sacred. You have to have sacred orientation toward the entire earth, including other people who are like you, vessels of divinity. And that's what Jesus said, wasn't it? Wasn't it? Wow! Wow! The Christian Church decided not to include in its official canon the many, many, many early Christian works that told the truth about this. It turned everything upside down, alas. It's time to set that boat straight, right? Have a look at the other videos in this series on Christian existentialism and at the other works on my channel. The next video, The Evidence for Panentheism, will explain the reasons for believing that the panentheism of indigenous peoples and of the earliest versions of our major religions is true. Please like and subscribe and comment and share these videos with others, and thank you for listening.